The topic for today is our annual Microsoft Roadmap Update. It's being presented by a panel of Directions on Microsoft analysts, and it's being led by the amazing Directions Editor-in-Chief, Mary Jo Foley. Take it away, Mary Jo.
Thank you so much, Nikki, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. As Nikki mentioned, the topic for today is our annual Microsoft Roadmap, what mattered in 2025 and what comes next. Our panel of Directions on Microsoft analysts are going to provide their takes on the top hot buttons for Microsoft across the enterprise product and licensing spectrum. They'll talk about issues they've been following in 2025 and some of the things they're expecting for 2026. Then I'll pose a few questions of my own to the analysts, and then you get to ask your questions live. To set the stage, there were a lot of changes in the Microsoft microcosm in 2025. Many key products like older versions of Exchange and Skype for Business Server and Windows 10 exited support. Microsoft accelerated its shift away from enterprise agreements this year, meaning programmatic volume discounts are going away. Meanwhile, Microsoft has continued to evolve the ways its copilots, agents, and other AI services are packaged, licensed, and priced, making your budgeting a lot more challenging, as you'll hear from our analysts today. Back to Nikki.
Oh, this is you, Mary Jo. Look, your picture's right on top.
All right. Well, let me talk a bit about Directions on Microsoft here. We have many resources on our site, both for paid members and people who have not yet become members. I have a blog on the site where we have many different takes from our analysts and myself. All you need to do, even if you're not a paid member, is go to directionsonmicrosoft.com/blog, and you'll get to all our coverage there. We have podcasts also in front of our firewall, so you can check those out, directionsonmicrosoft.com/podcasts. We're on LinkedIn. We are also on Blue Sky, and we are on X. And our job here is to help you make smarter decisions about Microsoft faster. If you're a paid member, you get access to Atlas, our paid portal, where you get everything from expert reports, licensing reference sets, our curated kits and collections, webinars like this, and more. We also do regular Microsoft licensing training, where we have our experts help you with your questions about your Microsoft contracts and negotiation, and a separate advisory and negotiation service where we can help you with things like verification, audit defense, and your Microsoft strategy assessment.
Thanks, Mary Jo. I didn't want to steal your thunder.
Thank you. All right, so let me introduce our esteemed panel of analysts who are ready to provide their hot takes today. We have David Berry, who is going to talk about Microsoft 365, SharePoint, and other issues that he covers. Greg DiMichele, who covers Azure services, including Azure Local. Jim Gaynor, who covers collaboration, Teams, and servers. Rob Helm, who's taken on Windows, Office apps, and Exchange. Wes Miller, who does identity, security, and governance for us. Rob Sanfilippo, who covers Azure, the Power Platform, and GitHub. And Andrew Snodgrass, who still covers data analytics, CRM, and ERP for us. We're going to start out today, even though it's not alphabetical, with Jim Gaynor, because Jim is going to talk about some of the big picture trends affecting Microsoft Enterprise customers. So take it away, Jim.
Okay, thanks everybody. Yeah, just wanted to kind of cover some of the big things, the macro stuff that I've been seeing, and then we can get down to some more specific items. One thing that we're really seeing is the product pruning is continuing. I mean, there was a time not too long ago when Microsoft was initiating lots of new projects and services, a lot of them overlapping, just kind of see what sticks, the old adage of throwing spaghetti against the wall. And that time's over. Microsoft's aggressively pruning out products and services that either aren't bringing in significant revenue. I don't mean they're not profitable. They're just not bringing in enough profit. Or they don't match their core mission of AI everywhere. Previews are being closed down quickly. Microsoft's being a lot more aggressive about retirements and deprecations. Heck, there weren't even any Black Friday deals on Xbox consoles this year. So the real thing here is take a look at what you're using. If you're relying on something that's an edge case that doesn't really tie into Microsoft's big AI push, you might want to look seriously at the product and whether or not Microsoft's going to keep paying attention to it just in case. Kind of similar to that, again, this is all things that Microsoft's kind of changing on you. A lot of the traditional licensing and life cycles are winding down, whether you like it or not. A lot of you are still relying on on-premises software with traditional buy it and you can use it forever licensing, or even the old standard of 5 mainstream, 5 extended for support. And you're kind of in for a rude awakening. Even the old standbys like Exchange Server, SharePoint Server have moved to subscription-based models with the new SE versions. There's still some holdouts like Windows Server and SQL Server, but it's questionable what will come with the next versions. And they're really trying to move those to a more subscription-based model anyway, with things like Azure Local and different versions of SQL Server. And even though there's an LTSC version of Office, it doesn't have the same levels of support. So again, Microsoft's trying to move you back from like, nope, you can't just buy it and keep it. They want to keep you on the hook for a subscription. They want to keep you on the hook for that continuous life cycle that you have to patch for, because it reduces their costs for potential security issues. And lastly, we're seeing something, we've talked about subscription has an entitlement to consumption, the idea that you get a subscription, and traditionally, subscriptions have been all you can eat. You get a subscription to something, you've got, hey, I can just keep using that, or it's got a hard limit, tiered based on your subscription level, such as how much OneDrive storage you get. But more and more of Microsoft's products that you license via subscription come with an entitlement to use that turns into pay as you go if you exceed it, as opposed to hard limits. And there's no wall there. There's no speed bump that says, hey, are you sure you want to use more because we're going to charge you more? Like, nope, if you exceed it, we're just going to start paying you more. It's really, the point of this is it's making cost control and prediction a lot harder for budgeting, for predicting how much something is going to cost. And it kind of feels a lot like your first one is free dark patterns that are more common, like predatory online games or play gotcha games, those little games that want you to, oh, you can get this, oh, hey, buy this, buy these things. And Microsoft's taking it, and they're using it, of course, to increase their revenue, because more revenue helps them do the AI push. But all of these things kind of come together in that it makes things a lot less predictable in the long term for support and for budget planning than you've seen in the past. And I think that echoes through a lot of what else we'll see today.
All right. Thanks, Jim. I
Handing
knew
that
you were
off.
going to get the gaming angle in there. I just had a
Had to.
feeling. All right. Next up, we have David Berry, who has been covering Microsoft 365 Copilot for us extensively this year, and especially how it is affecting the workplace. David?
All right. Thank you, Mary Jo. Hello, everybody. Wanted to kind of lead off here with, the Microsoft Office and M365 Copilot. In the latter half of 2025, we saw Microsoft roll out a lot of new capabilities through M365 Copilot for the Office suite under the auspices of efficiency and productivity. The changes started with the upgrade of the suite to Copilot Chat for all users, and then continued most recently with the rollout of dedicated Office agents for each of the major productivity apps. We're also starting to see model diversification within M365 Copilot, with Anthropic being the first choice for Office apps, and reportedly provides a better experience in some of these apps than the out-of-the-box model. The reality, though, remains that productivity is subjective when it comes to most of the daily tasks that these Office apps address, and ROI for the M365 Copilot platform is still elusive for businesses. In fact, with the efforts Microsoft is putting into enabling AI for the masses, it may actually be causing some more problems than it solves right now, especially in organizations that haven't trained up their employees on some of these new tools. Users are over-relying on AI-generated work, which is not going to be the same level of quality, as most of us realize, as what a person would do directly. And then as the work is passed off downstream, it's creating actual rework for peers and managers. HBR, the Harvard Business Review, actually went on to term this as work slop. And now reasons vary as to why this is happening. And it ranges, from people just learning how to use the tools to, time crunches, scheduling issues, to complacency. But regardless of the reason, people should be aware that they could be doing this and that it is usually recognizable by others. So while this issue is not unique to Microsoft, embedding AI into arguably the most popular productivity suite is certainly raising the risk that organizations will have to contend with this. So as you go forward with it, use AI wisely. Looking a little bit forward into 2026, AI continues to accelerate while in addition to organizations trying to understand what the actual value is that it can deliver, they're also looking for controls to govern the tools and the ever multiplying agents. For M365 Copilot, data readiness remains a key challenge for a lot of the organizations, given that SharePoint is the basis for the majority of the information that M365 consumes, or M365 Copilot consumes. And then user training also remains a critical component moving forward to avoid that work slop that I was just talking about, and to overcome some users' fears that AI is coming for their jobs, as has been out there and about with regard to the rollout of AI as a whole. And as agents proliferate, how will organizations maintain oversight and management, especially as Microsoft offers more opportunities for citizen developers to create them? Will agents watching agents become a thing? It's quite possible, given the volume of actions that agents would be able to handle. And with the recent announcement and Ignite with regard to Agent 365, it may be a step in the right direction. We'll see more in 2026 to see if it can deliver. Personally, I'd prefer to see a few more controls up front to help manage who can create agents in the first place. Thanks, Mary Jo.
Great. Thanks so much, David. Next up, Greg DiMichele, who covers Azure infrastructure, and on this particular talk, going to talk a bit about Azure Local. Take it away, Greg.
Thanks, Mary Jo. One of the trends that's really picking up speed is this increasing desire I'm seeing from particularly large customers to be able to really control the plug and pull the plug from their cloud provider if necessary. For years, there was this sort of stable environment where everybody knew that if you ran your stuff in Azure, it was probably in a data center where various legal jurisdictions might come into play, but most countries weren't throwing their weight around. And now all of a sudden you see genuine concern on the part of enterprise customers that what does it mean if I'm using cloud service from a US company in a data center that's in the UK and I'm a French company? And so we're seeing more and more companies, they don't want to walk away from the cloud, but they want the option for really disconnected operations. They want the ability to be able to take things and run them disconnected if the need arises. And Microsoft is leading into this with Azure Local. It's probably no secret, I've been a bit down on Azure Local for the year, really wanting to see some differentiated value. And Microsoft is now leaning into this sovereign private cloud as the thing Azure Local can deliver on. And I think that's interesting. Until now, Azure Local has really just been another way of running the same old software. Hey, you can run VMs on Azure Local. Well, I already had a way to run VMs. You can run SQL Server. Well, I already had a way to run SQL Server. But what we see is Microsoft taking a carrot and stick approach. You're starting to see more services where Azure Local is the only way to run it. It started with Azure Virtual Desktop, where if you wanted to run your virtual desktops on-prem and you wanted a modern environment, Azure Local was it. We've now seen the same thing with Azure Kubernetes. You used to be able to run Azure Kubernetes on Windows Server. Starting next year, that will no longer be the case. If you want on-prem Kubernetes, you have to use Azure Local. Well, now Azure Local is picking up the ability to run SharePoint and Exchange. My question is Microsoft going to continue the carrot and stick approach, and will in a future release we see Azure Local be the only way to run SharePoint and Exchange? Microsoft has not said that, to be clear, but the direction of travel is they seem to be relying not just on carrots and new capabilities to push people to Azure Local, but they're actually starting to apply some sticks and making Azure Local be the only way to run something. And my last really big question is, when will Azure Local get what I'm calling real cloud features? You know, it's embedded in the name Azure Local, the implication being that this is a way to run Azure locally. But as of yet, the only thing you can do with Azure Local is run the same stuff you already could run on-prem, but this time under a subscription model. I'm waiting for Microsoft to really step forward and give customers the ability to run in some way Azure services in an on-prem environment. Now, I want to be fair to Microsoft. This is way easier said than done. Azure services like those of Google and AWS were architected to run at data center scale. And when I say data center, I mean, think gigawatt power level data centers. Shrinking that software to run on a rack or two or in an enterprise data center is incredibly difficult. So I want to cut them some slack that this is easier said than done. But ultimately, until Azure Local delivers some net new capability that I couldn't get otherwise, it remains a product in search of a reason to exist. I think we're going to see, though, in 2026 that reason, and that reason is going to be this, what they're calling sovereign private cloud. We're going to be watching that closely to see whether Microsoft really does deliver the ability to take a workload that I run on-prem and run in Azure and choose to migrate it to a disconnected environment. If they can do that, they will deliver something that is actually valuable to customers. Mary Jo?
Nice. I like the speculation, and I bet some of the pressure AWS is putting on them is going to help that come to fruition. Just a guess. All right. Next up, Rob Helm, who is going to talk a bit about Windows and specifically Windows 365 and what's happening there. Rob?
I think you might be muted, Rob.
Yeah. Rob? All right. You know what we're going to do? We're going to switch the order and be a little creative with our alphabetizing again. And we're going to go to Wes and come back to Rob. So Wes Miller now is going to give us his take on the latest on compliance and security. Wes.
Thanks, Mary Jo. So when we look at Microsoft's management, identity, and security stacks, as well as compliance, Microsoft still is continuing this trend of pushing everything up market with new suites and add-ons. And there's an asterisk to this one that I want to put out there. But in general, Microsoft it sort of gets back to what Jim pointed out earlier with subscriptions. Here you got a subscription. Now we're going to have you add another layer of subscriptions on top of the subscription you already had. And in general, that's a trend we've been seeing continue. Microsoft also continues the robust trend of raising prices this year. However, we did see something interesting earlier this month with Microsoft switching up Intune and sort of breaking down the Intune suite. So we'll see a little bit more discussion of that over the coming weeks, but they've done something unusual, which is put more value into Microsoft 365, E3, and E5. So that's sort of put a push pin in that, because that's a distinct switch up from what we've seen Microsoft do over the past several years, where E3 and E5 have really been pretty stagnant. To that end, Microsoft's focus on security for the last several years has really just been on Defender XDR, on trying to converge all of these things with Microsoft Defender in the name into one portal. They've been doing the same thing with Purview. It's taken a little bit longer, but they're beginning to get there. But with the Defender technologies, if you're an organization that's invested in all of them, you are beginning to see some of the value of Microsoft converging these things together. That said, if you're a customer who's only invested in a couple of the pieces of Defender, the different Microsoft Defender technologies, and not all of the things you would need to create a full Defender XDR portal, you've sort of got some blind spots in terms of Microsoft stack. So you'll have to think through those and how your other solutions that you're using might answer those kinds of questions for you. That said, Microsoft's focus for all of the Defender technologies beyond this has really been on addressing real-world vulnerabilities and real-world breaches. We've seen almost a singular focus over the last 2 to 3 years, where if you see a new feature in Defender for Identity, or you see a new feature in Defender for Office 365, there's almost always a backstory behind it that if you go back a year or two, or maybe even less than that, you'll see a breach or a set of vulnerabilities that Microsoft felt a need to pretty aggressively address. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing, because we're not seeing a lot of new feature development and new feature value. But what we are seeing is Microsoft practically addressing these are real world concerns that customers face and addressing them head on. So it's got good and bad points. On the last piece here, this is a general trend that goes pretty much across all of the products and services that Microsoft sells now, but prices are up, and we saw that continue again this month. Budgets are down. I expect we'll see that aggressively continue in 2026 as everybody focuses in on AI and really trying to, I think, extract that value out of AI or figure out where it's a go, no go. And as customers, I know you need to focus on where the real ROI is available. And one of the things I've been concerned with over the last several years is seeing customers who've bought into Microsoft's E5 stack and haven't deployed it broadly. So I think we'll see a lot of customers over the next year thinking about where E5 makes the most sense and where they need to continue investing in those best of breed solutions, because we still do see a lot of customers who haven't invested completely in Microsoft's E5 security or E5 compliance stacks and are instead going with a third-party solution. That's sort of the perspective from where I am. Hand it back to you, Mary Jo.
Great. Thank you so much, Wes. I also am interested in if some of the additions Microsoft's making to E3 and E5 are going to make much of a difference. So we'll see. Next up, Rob Sanfilippo, who's going to talk about agents, and more agents. Rob.
That's right, agents. Agents, they're Microsoft's top focus, as you've probably seen, but you need to keep in mind that the company is presenting two worlds of agents. One is agents for developers offered through GitHub Copilot, and the other is for knowledge workers and administrators based around platforms including Microsoft 365, this new thing called Agent 365, Copilot Studio, and what they're now calling Microsoft Foundry, formerly Azure AI Foundry. It's almost like there's this emperor is not wearing any clothes situation. Because I keep pointing out, okay, there's these two worlds. I've talked to Microsoft about this. You realize you have these two separate worlds. I was at the Universe conference for GitHub, and we watched Ignite, and they were doing very similar things, but in two different worlds. So there's overlap for the user base of these two worlds, yet there's no out-of-the-box integration, which could cause need for redundant processes and policies for customers, and just some general confusion around what's happening there. And these two agents, these worlds have been offered for about a year, but now there's a governance platform for each, and these have emerged in the past couple months. The governance platform for GitHub Copilot agents is called Agent HQ, and the governance platform for the 365-based agents is appropriately called Agent 365. Again, there's no integration between these two governance platforms, but they offer the same set of capabilities, and each has their own tools and dashboards. So, Microsoft is not being upfront about this dichotomy, but customers should understand it and just not separate their internal teams that are working with each, because redundant efforts could be reduced when these teams work together. And my last point is we've seen a trend toward Microsoft using pricing models that meter the amount of AI-based resources being used and then charging accordingly. Now, that's opposed to the previous practice of using user SLs and fixed prices with all you can consume models. So for example, these 365 agents use a credits pricing scheme where different numbers of credits are consumed depending on the work being done by an agent. And likewise, GitHub Copilot now has a premium requests pricing scheme, and that could result in higher prices for some developers that use that Copilot. I'm going to talk a little bit about this more toward the end of the webinar too, but that's just want to make a point of that here up front. And that's it. Back to Mary Jo.
All right. Yeah, I think we're seeing what Rob's describing as what's called shipping the org chart, right? Basically, Microsoft has GitHub in one place and the Microsoft 365 team over there, and they're not really talking.
They're getting closer together, though. We're seeing a Microsoftification of GitHub, which is something I just did a report on, but things might change in that dichotomy in the next year or two. So we'll see what happens.
All right, cool. All right, next we've got Andrew Snodgrass, who is going to talk to us about the ever-evolving landscape of databases, dynamics, and fabric. Andrew.
It's just so exciting, isn't it?
It is.
Do I have to talk about AI? I suppose I do. Okay, so in the database area, Microsoft's doing some shuffling around, and they do this on occasion. It's kind of interesting. I've noticed that with SQL Server in particular, there seems to be a narrowing of focus, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, SQL Server tried to do a lot over the years, but they've retired the management data services, data quality services. They're actually swapping out reporting services for Power BI report server. So it's already separated, has its own install, and that's all on its own way. So really the only thing you have left in the main SQL Server area is the database. I mean, there's analysis services and integration services, but they've always been a little separate. But I don't necessarily have a problem with this big focus on the database. It's certainly not in any danger. Microsoft has put out with its latest version 2025, this idea of being able to use it as an AI database. And it's actually a pretty good idea simply because it's a very structured thing. And so if it's your structured data, if you're working with traditional tabular information, you can do AI related things within it. And they've got some good indexing capability in there. So I think that's probably a good thing. It is interesting to note that in the Azure side, they've retired Azure SQL Edge, Azure SQL Data Sync, Azure SQL Stretch. And so they're getting rid of some of these niche solutions and really saying, let's focus in on being a core database offering that's there. Now, there are a few open source things they're pushing. There's a new MongoDB and Postgres service that are out there, and they're trying to push some more stuff into Fabric as well. Speaking of Fabric, we can get back into the AI world here. Fabric is great, and it's trying to be everything for everyone if you're willing to run everything through Fabric, okay? And so, it kind of makes sense. I don't think Fabric is or ever will be an agnostic analytics platform. It's always working best when you bring stuff to it and you can use the tools that are there. And it makes it stickier for customers to stay there, and Microsoft generates more revenue for it. The one interesting thing that I thought was also supportive of this concept is that at Ignite, they came out with this thing called Fabric IQ. And it uses some AI stuff that was already there, adds on some data management on top of it as well. And it's a great idea to bring all this into one area if you're willing to bring it all in to one area. So if you're looking at Fabric, the focus is still inward toward Fabric. They love themselves. And the dynamic side, talking AI again, this is all about agentic AI, all right? And this is the idea that it does stuff in the background for you. It looks at emails for purchase orders and vendor quotes and everything else, and does a lot of manual effort that people used to have to do. And I think it's very powerful, and I like what they're doing in there. but it's also very expensive. And it's going to be a while to see if the cost is really worth it, if the value is actually there. These agents are in all the apps, and what they do is they consume Copilot credits, all the stuff that Mr. Sanfilippo was talking about. But the difficulty is not knowing how many credits it's going to wind up using. And I recommend that people try it, pilot it out, and see if the value that they're getting from the reduced manual effort is equal to the value of what they're paying for the Copilot credits. But this stuff is not going anywhere, so you need to get out there and take a look at it, AI across the board. Mary Jo, that's me.
All right. I think we're going to get Rob Helm back in the mix here, and he's going to talk to us about Windows. There you are. Rob, here you are.
Yes, good. Oh, great.
All
Sorry
right,
about that.
let's go. Windows 365. Go for it.
Windows 365. If you have a Windows client app or a group of PCs that you want in the cloud, I would plan on evaluating Windows 365 because over the last year, Microsoft has poured resources into it, and it has some unique capabilities and I think it will continue to close the technical gap with the alternatives that are available on Azure cloud services, at least. So just a reminder, Windows 365, it's a virtual desktop service hosted in Azure. But unlike other alternatives hosted in Azure for virtual desktops, it lets Microsoft manage most of the infrastructure, the gateways, the session hosts, and so on. It pays off, especially for customers who don't have virtual desktop experts in-house. Now, some customers need to have that. They'll be less compelled to look at it, but almost everybody else should at least evaluate it. And the system has evolved incredibly quickly over 2025. It started out, it only offered dedicated desktops, but now there's some kind of shared desktops like that would support, for example, shift workers in a call center. You can replicate desktops across locations for disaster recovery setup. You can share an application without the whole desktop, which is an obvious thing that's been in Citrix and the like forever, but they didn't have it when they launched, but added it in within a year. And more recently, there's a preview service to host desktop agents in Windows 365. To me, I see this almost as a cloud host for robotic process automation, which is one strategy, not necessarily the best one, but one strategy for shifting activities to bots from humans. And I hope that if you can combine cloud hosting and some generative AI love, then maybe that kind of setup, robotic process automation taking over for humans, could become more reliable and less expensive to test and keep going. You can't see, but my fingers are crossed. But I have to ask, is Windows really the right vehicle for delivering AI to your users and customers? I mean, there were great examples at Ignite of why you might want local AI running on Windows. Where you put language models and other AI components on the PC. For example, they argued at Ignite, some of the customers did, that you can get better results extracting data from speech or video if you're really close to the source. And a PC-like device can make that possible. Also, last November, Windows added a bunch of native features and APIs for doing local AI. But there's a definite but here. I can't really recommend them for high stakes projects yet. Why not? First of all, I got to say, I've got to be clear. It's definitely worth evaluating the Windows native AI platform. You sometimes hear it called Windows Foundry or Foundry on Windows, but I wouldn't recommend trying to keep that straight with all the other foundries. Let's just call it the native Windows API. It's an impressive lineup. They've got language models, they've got search, text generation, and image analysis APIs, and features for end users, all integrated together. But the question is, do they have enough critical mass to support a developers community that will create compelling applications? And do they have enough users to support and justify building those applications? The Windows team here made it its own case harder because they tied the Windows AI platform to specific hardware, the so-called Copilot PCs. But after being on the market for more than a year, it's pretty clear there's still a tiny fraction of PCs. And Ignite, we didn't see any major app vendor other than Microsoft committed to the Windows platform for AI. So again, I see this as something to evaluate, do a pilot, not just for the developer APIs, but also for the end user features, some of which, like recall, have proven pretty controversial because of their security and privacy implications, but not yet ready for a major commitment by anyone, in my humble opinion. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Rob. Now is a great time to be thinking about your questions that you might want to ask our panel. So if you have a question, please type it into the question panel. I am going to get my own set of questions ready, but first, back to Nikki.
Great, thanks, Mary Jo. Just wanted to quickly cover some of our resources while those questions come in. One of the advantages of a Directions on Microsoft membership is access to our newly upgraded member platform, Atlas. I love it. It's amazing. It makes your job easier with fast, intuitive, comprehensive access to deep Microsoft expertise. If you're a member and you need help accessing the platform, you can email us at service@directionsonmicrosoft.com. And if you're not a member and you'd like to learn more about how to gain access, please email us at sales@directionsonmicrosoft.com. And next up is training. We also offer training. It's key to staying ahead in our ever-evolving complex landscape of Microsoft licensing. Our Microsoft licensing training and contract negotiation workshops deliver unmatched expertise and insight. Our next offering is in person, February 3rd through 5th, at the beautiful Luskin Conference Center in Los Angeles, California. We really hope you can join us. To register or learn more, visit our website or email us at sales@directionsonmicrosoft.com. And then one last thing before I hand it back over, I wanted to talk about our advisory and consulting services. We'll help you level the playing field with Microsoft with our behind-the-scenes contract negotiation support, or verify your licensing position with accuracy with our audit defense service. Everything from strategy assessments to ongoing expert desk support, our industry veterans are here to help. If you want to learn more about our advisory services, please email us at sales@directionsonmicrosoft.com. And with that, Mary Jo, if you and the panelists are ready, we can head on to questions.
All right. I am ready. I'm putting my journalist hat on for a bit to ask some of these questions. And analysts, I need you to be brief. I know it's not your nature, but we're going to try to leave some space at the end here for customer questions and participant questions. So I want your answers to be tight. All right. I asked this question to the panel a year ago, but now we're another year into the cycle. Are co-pilots and agents any more worth the money and effort than they were a year ago? David Berry, I know you have things to say about this.
There
Maybe
we go.
There you
Okay.
go.
Sorry about that. All right. Yes, is the short answer to it all. I do think that we are seeing more opportunities to leverage, the co-pilots and the agents that are rolling out now. I think the biggest issue, as I mentioned in earlier, is really quantifying the ROI around the co-pilots and the agents. That I think is where the challenge remains. But what we've seen in the last year with regard to innovations and capabilities that have been rolling out certainly indicates that, at least in the realm of the M365 Copilot, we are seeing something for everyone in a sense, so that if they have access to M365 Copilot, whether it's leveraging the capabilities in the Office suite or the researcher agent, or if they are more in the data analysis and can take advantage of Excel, the Python that's in Excel, and the analyst agent, there is definitely some value to be had by everybody in there, I think. Thank you.
Okay. I think Greg DiMichele might have a different take. I'm just guessing. Greg?
Yeah. And I'm going to take a mixed approach. I want to be clear. I think large language models shown to have a great deal of individual productivity value. But I'm nowhere near as bullish on the agentic hype cycle at the moment. I think there's a pretty good chance that these are going to amount to what rounds to zero, because there's a growing body of research that shows that language is not the same as intelligence. And being able to string together words is not the same as having the intelligence to act even semi-autonomously. And I think the rubber's hitting the road where IT buyers are saying, great, show me the hard numbers, how this helps my business. And all the vendors, not just Microsoft, are replying with what I can only describe as jazz hands. And so, yes to co-pilots and chatbots, but I think a great deal of skepticism is necessary around these sort of agents talking to agents, agents acting even semi-autonomously. I encourage folks to look at some of the research. Language is not intelligence; they are two separate things. And so I'm a mixed case. I'm very pro LLMs and co-pilots. I'm much more skeptical about agents.
All right. Let's go to question 2. Is security any more job number 1 at Microsoft than it was a year ago when it was supposedly job number 1? Wes?
No. Well,
You,
not
okay.
to be right out of the gate, but the reality is that, again, Microsoft is focusing a lot on AI, and I do believe that security is sort of taking a back seat to that right now. It's just not an area that they're investing in. They're making a lot of money off of it, and I think the Defender technologies are getting some regular investments, but not anywhere near the rate that we saw over 3 to 5 years ago, when the Microsoft was really beginning to push them pretty heavily, and revenue started growing out of there. So I think it's an area that they're concerned with, but I don't think it's an area that they're investing in, especially when we compare it with things like co-pilots and agents. Just isn't seeing the investment.
Okay, Rob Helm, I bet you also have something to say.
Well, yes, actually, I felt like watching the history of Windows 11 24H2, the version that came out last year, that job 1 security was running headlong into job 1 AI in the OS. That was the version that shipped most of the AI components I talked about. And it's had some, frankly, what I'd characterize as signs of distress. Microsoft had to give up on its plan to dribble it out on a monthly basis, which is how it's been shipping versions of Windows since 2021, because it was just too fat. At least that's what I surmised. And then from what the scuttlebutt was that it was coming out very slowly. People who would be enthusiastic and wanted to have it couldn't get it. That often is a sign of quality problems. I'm worried that as Microsoft continues to rapidly try to build out an AI stack natively in Windows, it may be storing up pain for itself in the security realm because of quality. But to be fair, we don't yet have any sign that that's the case. But again, 24H2's rollout was so slow, we haven't seen the worst it's delivered yet.
Okay, that's worrisome, but yes, realistic. Next, how will Microsoft's many licensing changes across the company impact organizations in the coming year? Let's start with Rob Sanfilippo, who's been tracking this a lot.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, so Microsoft's pricing models for AI offerings are evolving rapidly toward metered purchasing. So this means that the sky can be the limit for prices on certain services. And customers need to be wary of this by closely monitoring and limiting their spend on these types of services. There are some commitment purchasing models offered. These are like similar to Azure reservations, and you get a discount for committing up front. That could be a monthly thing or an annual thing, and this is changing almost weekly with new types of programs they have for example, when you buy Copilot credits, now you can buy them on an annual basis or you can buy them in packs for a month, and you save over how much they would cost if you just stay strictly pay as you go. And you can expect metered purchasing to proliferate, because the reality is that data center resources to drive AI services is extraordinarily expensive. You've heard of the tens and hundreds of billions of dollars being spent on this stuff. So I think the all you can consume style licensing aren't feasible. Keep watching for meters and watch those meters when you deploy, because they might not have any limits on them.
Wes, anything to add beyond that?
I think Rob's right on that. A lot of the AI stuff, they've been really focused in on how do we make this look less painful or make it more efficient operationally for organizations. On the other side, I would say though, the enterprise side of productivity and security, we're again seeing prices go up right now, and I think that most organizations are not in a situation where they're really going to welcome increased prices over the next 12 to 24 months. They're under a lot of pressure themselves. So that's going to put a lot of pressure on organizations. Some of the things that we saw, like E3 and E5 beginning to incorporate some of the Intune suite stuff, that's great, but it's sort of baby steps compared to the increasing prices of the rest of the stack underneath it.
Okay, let's finish up with a game, one or two word answer if you can. Microsoft's biggest opportunity, biggest risk, biggest liability. And the same thing can be all three if you want. Andy?
I think the biggest opportunity is this AI on the metered charges, but I also think it's the biggest risk. I think they eventually are going to piss off their customers. The reason why is there are traditional features, and I see it in Dynamics and in Power BI that were included in the user subscription that are now being replaced with agentic and AI related stuff that's going to cost extra. So you could do what you did before, but now you got to pay differently for it and pay more. And I think that's a huge risk. I think they're going to tick people off with it.
Yeah. Jim, what do you say here?
AI is the answer to all three. No, seriously, they're putting a ton of money into it, but they're in the catbird seat. If it goes big, they're big because not only do they have services, but they've been investing heavily in data centers. I mean, you got to have a place to run all this stuff, and it's not cheap. That said, it's the biggest risk. Unlike some company that's just writing software to run it, if you're just writing software and the software fails, that's fine. Your company folds. If this concept doesn't take off the way Microsoft wants it to, they've got billions of dollars in data center investment that they're stuck with.
So it better work, or there's a potential AI bubble, isn't there?
You think? Just maybe. I mean, yes, there's a possibility. We remember when we had the dot-com crash, but then there had been all this heavy investment in fiber that didn't get used, and that dark fiber then got lit up later on as things started to grow again, and that can possibly be it. But fiber networking lasts a long time, and there's still, I mean, Microsoft's traditional servers deprecate over 6 years right now is what they use, and these chips, the NVIDIA chips that are being used for AI, we currently aren't running into when they actually start to fail, but in generally, people are considering the deprecation cycle to be much shorter. So it's not like you can, I've got all these chips and, they're in data centers, and they can just sit there and they'll be useful 7 years from now. Like, no, they're going to age out. So it's the opportunity, but it's also the risk.
Well said. All right, it's time for our participants' questions. I think Nikki will take over from here.
Fantastic. Yes, we've got a flood of questions, really good engagement here. First question, is Azure Virtual Desktop strategic for Microsoft, or will they pour more resources into Windows 365? We have both. Any thoughts on that?
This sounds like a Rob Helm question.
Yeah,
yes.
I'd like to take that one if I may. I gave AVD short shrift, but it wasn't really fair, I admit. It's lying there behind, it's the man behind the curtain for Windows 365. It's also behind the management plane of the Citrix and Omnissa solutions on Azure. It's not going, and it's finally, it's the Azure local solution if you want to do virtual desktops on premises. So AVD will not go away. What I would expect over time is that fewer and fewer customers will use it directly, but rather through one of the services I mentioned.
Thanks, Rob.
If I can hop in here for a second too.
Great,
Because
thanks.
I was covering AVD before, Rob's been covering it now, but I was covering it in the past. And AVD is the next version of remote desktop services. So Windows 365 is a nice, tightly packaged solution, but there's always going to be somebody who wants to get in and customize everything. Remote desktop services on Windows Server is dead. It's a dead man walking. They haven't announced the retirement, but it might as well be. AVD is built on what Microsoft had initially designed to be the next generation of remote desktop services. So yeah, it's still going to be around. I think it's still important for Microsoft.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Jim. Next question. Do you think that Windows 365 can be a solution for the issue of independent contractors using BYOD?
Up to a point. But remember that everything that goes on to Windows 365, starting with Windows itself, has to be licensed. And so you run into all the same problems you always run into independent contractors. And it's always a big part of our contract negotiation considerations. It's best to look at it as the data center layer of licensing, and then you have to start from the Windows layer up.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Next question. With volume discounts gone, do you feel organizations will change their attitude towards license purchasing?
Wes may have something to add here.
Yeah, we've got a lot to think about over the next several years. I mean, the volume discounts are definitely it's going to hit some customers pretty hard this year. I think we're still assessing how hard it's going to be on different sized organizations. So it's sort of hard to tell at this point. But yeah, it's going to be one of those things that, again, while we're seeing price increases at the same time, it's a lot to ask of customers in a 1 year stint.
Thank you, Wes. Let's see, next question. How should organizations control Microsoft rolling out M365 Copilot chat to applications?
David Barry, this is you.
So I think, primarily the Copilot chat as the unlicensed version, it needs to be rolled out with the appropriate training to go along with it. Microsoft is looking at it primarily as a stepping stone to get people engaged and using M365 Copilot. And there's relative security, well, maybe security is not the right word, but privacy, I guess, in some respects, in that the Copilot chat is bound by the organization's security rules, as well as not having access to the internal content. So the risk profile is lower. So there's not as much of a concern from the leakage of data at that particular point in time. As it rolls out to the different applications, as I mentioned, I think predominantly is a great opportunity for people to get in there and start using it, and the organization's having a plan around training for it, as well as governance, the rightful use of it, and then, kind of as an offshoot of that would also be, having your plan around the shadow AI of, offering Copilot chat instead of having people go out and use some of the public services that may end up actually leaking the information. So from that standpoint, I hope that answered the question.
Great, thank you. Next question. For a pending contract renewal, what usage patterns should we monitor now to avoid budget surprises for new consumption services?
Wes,
Mary Jo.
maybe, or
Yeah,
anyone
yeah.
else?
Possibly
Anyone
sense
want
people
this one?
behind me. A lot of it comes down to which ones we're talking about. I literally just got a question in from another customer about the same thing, and I think it's one of those things that it's sort of, you have to step back and reflect which service you're thinking about. But in general, you want to think about how much you're spending on that service over a year as it is, and figure out whether if you applied like a reservation, depending on what service it is, or savings plan, if it might apply to it, if it's compute, which one would save you more, and how well you understand that consumption over a 1 to 3 year period, and then again look at investing in either savings plan or a reservation if it makes sense, if you understand that perspective. That's the best thing I can suggest right now, but just in general, try to get a snapshot of at least 3 months to 6 months and see what that looks like. Are you trending up or are you trending down? And that will help you get an idea for the next 36 months beyond that.
Great. That's great. Thanks, Wes.
I would just add on that one.
Sure.
These things are the challenge with many of these consumption services. They're not measured in units that any human can possibly have an intuition about. And so experimenting and trying it is the only really path forward. I don't think many organizations, particularly in the AI space, can predict the number of tokens they're going to use based on a workload description. So you really do have to run controlled pilots to get a sense of what something's going to cost. I know that's a terrible answer, but it's the reality of where much of these services are.
Absolutely true. Thanks, Greg. I always look at it in terms of virtual machines first, but you're absolutely right. And anything beyond that, you're, quarks per second, who knows?
Great. Thanks, Wes. Thanks, Greg. Next question. How do the price increases coming affect those that are on an MCA?
I'm thinking you mean the Microsoft 365 price increases that just got announced, but there may be others as well. And who wants to take this? David?
I can jump in at least briefly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in general, the MCA offers no programmatic discounts whatsoever, and the price increases are just going to pass through as far as I've been able to tell so far. That said, we haven't seen the full reach of the MCA, because most people who are getting the MCA are getting it right now on the CSP plan, which and it has not been brought to most people's enterprise agreements. That is going to be happening over the next couple of years, and we're starting to work out what the impact of that will actually be, because that's going to be a big group of people. If you don't have level D discounts now, there's a good chance you'll be on EA and MCP after your next renewal.
Great. Thank you, Rob.
If I can I add something to that, please?
Yes, please.
Just one thing, and just kind of in general, is we talked before about how Microsoft is pruning so many things in favor of focusing on AI, and that includes a lot of their sales force. That includes a lot of people in sales and other areas, and so that means that they don't want to have to deal with negotiating with you. Unless you're a really massive customer, they don't want to deal with it. You got the MCA, there's the prices you've got. No, we're not going to have somebody come out and have a nice, comfortable negotiation with you and give you some discounts. Nope, here it is, take it or leave it.
And that is not just for licensing and purchasing, it applies to technology as well. For example, there are extended security updates available for Exchange Server 2019. Available to whom? To the people who have a Microsoft account manager, which is a smaller and smaller fraction of the customer. And so some of you may be left in the cold and forced to migrate much faster than you wanted to Exchange Server SE, simply because you're too small to bother with.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Jim. It looks like we have time for one more question. The final question is, how will the global supply chain increase cost of computer memory impact Microsoft service costs? Do we expect rising costs of AI services tied to hosting costs?
I would say it's hard to know right now, but we'll definitely see if Microsoft has to face it as they build out either new data centers or new compute in existing data centers. You definitely would see that reflected in there. As new regions come online, those in particular will probably come online at a higher price based on what Microsoft has to pay. That's historically what they've done with new regions. When they come online, if they cost more, you see the increase. If they cost less, you'll see the savings. So we'll see.
Ditto for new instances. If they introduce new VM families, they'll end up costing more than they otherwise would have. Will they go and retroactively increase the price on existing families? They could, but I consider it's probably unlikely unless the RAM price is persistent for a long period of time. I suspect they would try to just smooth that out. But you definitely should expect that new VM families, in addition to the regions Wes talked about, will come in more expensive.
I see. Okay, thank you. Well, it looks like we're at time. Mary Jo, is there anything that you would like to say before I close us out?
I would just like to say thanks to everyone who joined us today on the webinar, and especially to our panel of analysts here at Directions on Microsoft.
Yes, thank you all very much. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining us.